All rise.
Please be seated, thanks. Oh, let's get on record here. This is CR 2014-1975 and CR 2015-1416, State versus Stephen Casaus. Counsel, can I have your appearances here just a moment?
Just Your Honor, Nicholas Marshall and Wesley Jensen for the state.
Good morning, Your Honor. Cindy Leos and Tom Clark on behalf of Steve Casaus, who appears in court today.
Of course, we're here for sentencing here. Mr. Marshall, you provided this. I did not have a an opportunity to look at this. Would you have this back? Come get this. We're here for sentencing, and I've reviewed a few things, of course, most of which I'm sure you have as well. The purposes of sentencing here, the most important of which is the pre-sentence report that was provided. Assuming counsel received your copy of the pre-sentence reports.
Yes,
Had a
Your Honor.
chance to review it.
Yes.
Mr. Marshall.
Yes, Your Honor.
Along with that was the offense report, the summary report that was attached to that. I don't know if you received that in your copy as well, but I certainly did. If you did not, please tell me. I received a couple of letters late just this morning. One was from Senator Gurley-Barreza, and the other was from S.C. Suqueo. And I reviewed those as well. And then, of course, I reviewed, Ms. Leos, your sentencing memorandum, which was filed on the 4th, so I had a chance to review that as well. Was the state going to provide a sentencing memorandum for purposes of sentencing here this afternoon, this morning?
No, Your Honor, I've not had an opportunity.
So, is there anything else that I should have received for purposes of review before we proceed here this morning? From the state, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
And from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Oh, let's proceed. So, for purposes of sentencing, again, I want to make sure we're clear. That's what we're reviewing. There was a jury verdict of guilty on count 2 of the indictment that was renumbered from count 1. It was a guilty verdict with regard to which was child abuse recklessly caused or recklessly permitted, resulting in death, child abuse trial. And the alternative, guilty on the alternative count 4, which was child abuse recklessly caused or recklessly permitted, death of bodily harm. There was a guilty verdict on count 5, which is tampering with evidence. A guilty verdict for count 6 and count 7. I think these are renumbered because of joining the indictments. And both of those were guilty verdicts on bribery, intimidation of a witness. And those are the guilty verdicts. Is that everybody's understanding here in terms of what the court is considering here this morning?
Yes, Your Honor, those 5 charges.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's proceed. Mr. Marshall.
Your Honor, the first, there are several people, or there's some individuals that I would like to talk or make a presentation to the court. The first person the state would like to have come forward is Sylvia Marquez.
Okay, come forward if you would. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor.
You certainly know you have an opportunity to allocate to the president of the court before we proceed to sentencing here today. So, which one?
Dear Judge Whitaker, I am the aunt of Amari and his 2 siblings, Nevi and Stevie. Since Amari was killed, I have become a licensed foster parent so that I could care for them, and will soon adopt the 2. This process in itself was very difficult and hard. As the upcoming adopted parent of Nevi and Stevie, my job is to do everything I can to make sure that they are safe and make sure they feel safe. This is something they did not have before or experience. In the almost 2 years since my nephew Amari was killed, there have been so many disclosures and reports these two kids have talked about happening in the house with Cynthia and Esteban, Steve. Nevi on many occasions has talked about Esteban hitting her with a belt, punching her, kicking her. How her and Amari would hide in a dark closet so that they could be safe from Cynthia and Steve. Also at times put in the closet from them in a dark place, scared and afraid. Nevi also talked about times they would get mad at him. Steve would get mad at him. And he pointed a gun at them. Didn't shoot it. But they were scared. Nevi also talked about the scars that she had on her body, which were cigarette burns from both of them. Little Stevie has told us about Esteban hitting him with a bat and about being bit. Nevi talked about Esteban having guns under his bed, sometimes in the drawer next to the bed. They talked about being left in the car by themselves all the time while they ran into the store or ran into a house. Crying, scared, not sure what was going on. Talked about seeing needles laying around the house. All these disclosures came from these two kids while watching TV, while out in public, just randomly while we were with family, never knowing what may trigger a memory or a thought. Even that night Amari was killed, she came to me, Auntie. I saw Mommy and Daddy punching and kicking him. They dragged him to the shower. She talks about Amari screaming for help. She's asking them to stop. No one listened. She remembers seeing Amari with blood on his face. She talks about sitting on the bed with Amari as his body just lays there, not knowing if he's asleep or dead. This memory is something that causes flashbacks and nightmares to this day for both siblings. Nevi and Stevie's lives changed that night forever. Nevi and Stevie both have PTSD and are going through intensive therapy. It's been almost 2 years now and things are still hard for them. They still don't understand why their brother can't be fixed. Every day saying, I miss him, Auntie. I just want him back. They never got to say their last goodbyes. So we make trips to the cemetery so that they can talk to him. That in itself is hard. Because then the questions come. Auntie, why? Why, Auntie? Why can't we just dig him up and fix him? I just want to see a piece of him, Auntie. I just want to touch my brother Mari. Then she talks about wanting to go to heaven so she can be with him. She just wants Amari back so she can be happy. Hearing their pain and hurt breaks my heart almost on a daily basis. But yet, having to be strong and hold it in and take it away for them for that minute, for that hour, then finding the time myself to let this out and process it. I wish I could take it all away. But all I can do is help them to heal and help them to feel safe. Your Honor, I need your help. I need your help to give me and Nevi to help them feel safe by telling them that Esteban is in jail and will not be able to hurt them anymore. I want to be able to assure them that this man will be locked away and far from them for a very long time, long after they are adults. They say it takes a village to raise a child. I can't do it on my own. I need the court's help to give these beautiful children a chance that their brother did not have, a chance to feel safe. Finally, before you decide what sentence to order, I want you to know about Amari. Amari, when he was little, lived with me during his young life because of certain circumstances, because Steve put him in, throwing him against the wall, being caught in a stolen vehicle, and the environment that they lived in. So I raised Amari with my family. Then he was taken from us, and we relived the pain and the hurt of that every single day. Amari was only 9 years old when his life came to an end. Despite the abuse and neglect that plagued his young life, Amari was an incredible and loving child. He had some intellectual disabilities and ADHD, but was always trying to please the adults around him. Amari's behavior issues were a result of his living environment. The things that he had to witness, the things that he went through. Amari had a beautiful smile. He loved his little brother and sister so very much. Amari was their big brother, their best friend, their caregiver, and at times, their protector. Amari at school would help a classmate who had a walker walk up the stairs while he would carry the walker, being caring and still showing what kind of a kid this child was. He enjoyed playing basketball with his friends. No one knew the pain Amari was going through. He had dreams, he had goals, which he will never get a chance to do. Amari was amazing. So what did this 9-year-old boy do that was so bad to have his life taken from him 2 days after Christmas and 2 months before his birthday? Every child deserves to be happy and to be safe, Your Honor. No child deserves to be belittled the way Amari was. No child deserves to be told, "I will never be your father. I hate you more than anybody I ever know." Amari lost a chance to be happy and safe, but his brother and sister still have that opportunity to have happiness and safety in their lives. I gave Esteban a chance to say his last goodbyes to Amari. He shows up in sweats and a beanie and goes to the back of the room. Couldn't even go and see Amari, his child, and say goodbye or I'm sorry. Instead, walks out. I give Steve a chance to say his goodbyes again at the burial. And again, no show. Tell me, as an adult and a parent to any child that you lost, no matter the circumstance, who could not say their last goodbyes? I can't change what has happened to my nephew Omari, but I can change things for his siblings. As a family, we will never get over his loss. The images of Omari that I have, his last images, will never leave my mind. And that's not an image I should have to hold on to for life. But yet, holding on to the good memories we have had, the good memories that I know of, I will hold on forever too. Trying to get over the pain and the suffering that Omari endured, the pain and the hurt his siblings are suffering. We are trying to heal together. So, Your Honor, I ask that you please give a step on the max for each of the charges. I have forgiven Steve so that I can move forward to do what's best for Neva and Stevie. Esteban will have to answer to the higher power about what he did. I just want to ask that you help me, Your Honor, to hold him accountable for his actions. Thank you for taking your time and your consideration.
And Your Honor, there were a couple other people that thought they might want to make a statement. I'm not sure if they do. One is David Marquez. I'm not sure. And then there was a member of the Sotelo family, Etsy Sotelo's, I think, granddaughter might have wanted to make a statement.
Excuse me. My name is Latasha Smith, and I am the granddaughter of Etsy Sotelo.
Yes.
Excuse me. Well, we had got Omari in October of 2006. He was a loving, adorable child when he came into our family. Like they say, blood is thick in the water, but he was family. Regardless of being blood or not, he was family. He was adorable, he was loving, caring. He cared for his sister at the time. He shielded her for everything she needed. And when we gave him back, it hurt. I was the last one to see him out of my family. 4 days before he passed, I ran into him again. Him and his mother, Cynthia. 4 days later, I see on the news that he was gone. I was devastated. I got the call from my grandmother. I heard it in her voice. And to see my grandmother go through this, it hurts. My grandmother was a caring caretaker for him and his sister. And to know that somebody would do this to a child is devastating. It's disgusting. No child should go through the pain that Omari had went through. And just the fact of knowing that there was an abuser to a little boy, it makes me want to puke. But Your Honor, I'm just here today for support of everyone who loved Omari. And I hope that he gets what he deserves. Thank you.
Others, Mr. Marshall?
I don't believe there was anyone else that was going to make a statement. I do have some arguments, Your Honor. And Your Honor, what I think the statements by both the Marquez family and the Sotelo family show is that there were plenty of individuals that cared for Omari Burrell. At different points over his lifetime, he was taken into the care by the Marquez family and the Sotelo family, either when the defendant and Cynthia Casaus went to jail, or because things were so bad in the home that they were turned over to these family members and friends to care for him. But it shows that there were options, shows that there were people that cared about Omari. But it also shows that this was not an isolated incident. And you see that also in a variety of different ways, both through the statements of the friends and family of Omari, but also in the different other reports that happened. There were the other reports from CYFD that he had a black eye at the school and they'd called it in. That there were the other 911 phone calls that talked about him by being hit. There was a 911 call that was provided to the court, and I understand the court didn't have time to review it. But the other reason why that is important is in the sentencing memo by the defense, they make it out to be like he was a caring father for not only Omari, but the other siblings. But even in that 20-minute snippet of the 911 call, it shows what the life was like for these children. And what you heard in that 911 call is the defendant being incredibly demeaning, derogatory, swearing at the children. He would tell Omari, in the end you hear him say that, show me you want to be a part of the family, be a regular boy, then I'll be your dad. Until then, I want nothing to do with you. You hear him say that these kids are fucking messed up. You hear him telling Cynthia Casaus, I'm going to beat these fucking kids, man. I'm going to fucking lose it one of these days because of your bitch ass. You make me sick, Omari. You make me and your mother sick. These are only some of the snippets, Your Honor. It goes on for the full 20 minutes at different points of him swearing and cursing at Omari. You hear him tell Omari at one point, and you want me to be your dad? Fuck you. Don't ever fucking look at me as your dad. Fuck you. He's saying this to Omari in front of not only Omari, but also Omari's siblings. And Cynthia Casaus is you can hear her coming in and out of the room as well. It starts in the car and then it goes into the home. And you see her both being present and then leaving and coming back. You hear him say that I can't handle it anymore. I fucking hate that kid. You hear him tell Omari, I wish you weren't here. You hear him tell Omari that you make me so fucking sick. You're my worst enemy. You got me mad at you. You're a pain in the ass. And I've never hated anybody like you in my life. You know that, Omari? I hate you more than I've hated anyone in my whole life. And I've been on this earth 41 years, and nobody has made me feel the way you do. You are a kid, and that is sad. You hear him tell Omari, I fucking can't stand you. I despise you. You hear him say, you don't mean nothing to me. You hear him say that he just wishes he wasn't around, that he wasn't there. Part of the reason why it's important is the portrayal of him as a good father, but part of it goes towards the count that he was convicted on. While the state still would contend that he was involved in the death of Omari, he was specifically convicted on the charge that he did nothing to try to help Omari after he'd been beaten so bad that he was bleeding out in that house. That he and Cynthia were the two adults there, and they did nothing to care for him. They weren't trying to get the necessary aid. You heard from the Dr. Upham, the emergency room physician, during the trial that this would have been painful, and you would have seen the child, both from Dr. Upham and Dr. Upko, that the child would have begun going downhill. He would have started acting abnormally, then he would have had sort of altered mental status, then he would have sort of kind of gone unconscious and eventually died. The defendant sat there that whole time in that house and didn't do anything about it. He was more concerned about other things going on. He was more concerned about himself. He was more concerned about, according to one of the witness statements and one of the police reports, was that he called and made a statement that the place, something to the effect that the place was either loaded, which she took to mean that it was full of guns, money, and drugs. So he took the time to go try to hide that because that was not found in the search of the house, the drugs or the guns. They did find some money, however. That pain that Omari went through also wasn't isolated to that day. When you look at the images from the photographs, the number of marks, we heard from the emergency room nurse talk about that this was one of the most severely abused children that she'd ever seen. That there were all sorts of different bruises on his body, that there were cigarette burns, which is also one of the charges that the defendant was convicted of, that he had burned him, that those were the 3 cigarette marks on the child's chest, as well as the counts of bribery or intimidating a witness, and those are the 2 counts which refer to the siblings. We heard that from Nibby's testimony and the defendant's statement to the police about how that he discussed it with them, but they were told not to say anything and not to report what had happened in the house, and also a tampering with evidence charge. Your Honor, the defendant also has a history. He has 7 different felony convictions. They're separated into several different 7 different cases that had existed, but they were combined into different pleas at various points or overlapping. However, there was only they range in everything from drug possession, stolen vehicle charges, some other kind of white-collar crimes. As pointed out in the sentencing memo from the defense, the violent crime that he was convicted of was disarming a peace officer and aggravated battery on a police officer back in 1998. The state had also was going to prepare supplemental information. Some of those previous charges would be applicable under habitual offender enhancement. Initially, the defense had stated they were going to oppose anything, but today it was represented that since it was included as part of the plea agreement in the drug case that he had pending that was kind of running concurrent to this case, defense is going to essentially stipulate that there was one prior conviction, and so the state will file that supplemental information, but we would ask the court take that all into consideration as part of the sentencing today. When you factor in the one prior conviction, you see that the defendant is facing an exposure range of anywhere from 19 to 35 years of potential exposure.
How do you get from 19 to 35? I was saying 19. So the 35 is what?
Your Honor, that would be if all counts were run consecutive, and all the habitual time was also added on and run consecutive. That it would add up
1 year per charge is what you're saying?
Yes, Your Honor. So that there's a potential enhancement 1 year per count or per charge for an additional potential of a 5-year additional enhancement. That is up to the court's discretion, but if the state would be asking for the maximum sentence, that he would be sentenced for all counts to run consecutively to each other, and that he face the full amount of time, including the habitual offender enhancement time, to have that run consecutive to each other, that he be sentenced to the 35 years. Furthermore, Your Honor, 2 of the counts are considered optional serious violent offenses. Both of the child abuse counts, the one that was in part for the neglect, the medical issues that related to his death for not rendering aid, the kind of that reckless medical attention, as well as the cigarette burns to his chest. Both of those counts are optional serious violent offenses. In light of the abuse that was sustained by Omari, the fact that this was a very painful situation for Omari and it was an extended period of time, and the cigarette burns onto his chest would have been an intentional, painful, violent act by the defendant. We would ask that both of the child abuse counts be considered serious violent offenses for the purposes of the sentencing, and as that affects his potential good time credit within the Department of Corrections. Your Honor, there were several other special conditions included as part of the PSR. We would ask that those are incorporated, that all fines and fees, that their list would be incorporated, that any restitution that would be necessary for Nevaeh and Stevie would be determined by the probation authorities, as well as their sort of costs. And we also would incorporate the recommendations, the recommendations to parole, assuming if he was to be maxed out or if any time was suspended, that he successfully complete the types of counseling that they list. And that he not have any contact with Omar's family, with the co-defendant, with the Marquez family, and at any point during his period of incarceration, probation, or parole. Your Honor, we'd also just like to incorporate some of the sentiments that were provided in some of the letters. There were 2 letters provided to the court, and just again ask that I don't need to reiterate everything. The court was obviously aware of everything that happened in trial, but this was a very abusive situation that day, as well as it was an abusive situation for Omari whenever he was in the home with the defendant and the co-defendant, Cynthia Casaus. And for all of those actions and for his criminal history, we would ask that he be sentenced to the maximum sentence for the total of the 35 years of incarceration.
Ms. Laos, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Judge. Your Honor, I'd first like to start with the state's recitation of what was allegedly on the 911 call. We'd obviously object to the state's summary of that. We would also object to the fact that there was, obviously, the court found that to be not relevant at the trial, and I'd ask the court to find that it is not relevant at sentencing. The law in New Mexico, though limited, has held, a Supreme Court case has held that only relevant evidence should be considered at sentencing. And that's State versus Sanchez, and that's a 2008 Supreme Court case wherein the Supreme Court looked at whether a prior conviction should be considered by the sentencing court if not relevant. Now, this court ruled that that 911 was not relevant at trial, and I'd ask the court to find that it's not relevant today. But even if the court thinks that it is relevant, again, we would object to the state's summary of it. We don't believe that that's what it holds or that's what it shows. And indeed, there was additional stuff that the state did not mention in their recitation of that 911 call that would be obviously important for the court to take into context.
Well, certainly, I think the concern was that the 911 tape might be so overly prejudicial to the defendant in the case. I think that was the basis of the ruling.
And Your Honor, and the case law in New Mexico, at least this one case, talks about relevance at sentencing as well. And again, I'm urging the court to find that it is not relevant for consideration at sentencing. It's not, if you look at just the definition of relevance, it doesn't make a fact at issue before the court more or less probable. What it does is it just prejudices my client incredibly. He was not on trial for the content of that 911 tape. The court doesn't have to decide today whether Mr. Casaus is a good dad or a bad dad. That's not at issue. What we're looking at are the charges that the jury found Mr. Casaus guilty of, and that's it. And so the 911 is just incredibly prejudicial and irrelevant. Now, as I indicated in my sentencing memo, the state, as I anticipated, would be asking for a sentence that exceeds what the jury convicted him of, at least as far as the intentional versus reckless child abuse. The jury was under, as the court knows, tremendous pressure to convict Mr. Casaus of intentional child abuse. With the media frenzy, with the heart-wrenching evidence in this case and having to hear from Nevi and just having to look at this little boy die on a lapel video. That jury had just the humanness in them, and then the media pressure had every reason to find Mr. Casaus guilty of intentional child abuse. And they had 2 opportunities to do it, 2 separate counts. And that jury decided that Mr. Casaus was not guilty of intentional child abuse, yet the state is asking you to sentence him as though they did find him guilty of intentional child abuse. Of course, everyone involved in this case has the pressure to show, tough on crime and tough on child abuse. But I'm asking the court to look at what the jury found and sentence Mr. Casaus accordingly.
Well, it certainly indicates to me the jury was...
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
I said it certainly indicates to me that the jury was just paying attention, so they were obviously taking their job seriously with the evidence that was presented.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I'm not sure if that hurts or helps.
I think it helps, Your Honor. They were paying attention, and they found that Mr. Casaus did not kill Omari. What they found was that he was reckless, that he didn't call for 911 quicker. That's what they found him guilty of. That he made a mistake, and it was a reckless mistake, but it was a mistake, not an intentional. He did not hit. They did not find he hit, struck, or did anything to physically abuse that child. It was a mistake. It was a reckless mistake. We're not retrying the case here today. The courts heard the evidence. The jury heard the evidence. The court has a tremendous amount of jurisdiction here. And just because the court has the jurisdiction to sentence Mr. Casaus to the 35 years, I don't think that the court should. And I'm urging the court to look at what the jury found and sentence Mr. Casaus to a concurrent sentence with the 3rd-degree felonies, running concurrent to the reckless child abuse. I'm asking the court to consider mitigating factors, as I outlined in my sentencing memo, that Mr. Casaus, certainly everyone is a product of their upbringing and their environment. Mr. Casaus' upbringing in his childhood was far from ideal, and he experienced his share of abuse and chaos in the home. And he wasn't a perfect dad, but again, that's not what the court has to decide. So I'm asking the court to consider mitigating the 18 to 12 and to running the 4 3rd-degree felonies concurrent. If the court is inclined to give the full 18, I'm asking the court to consider running the 3rd-degree felonies concurrent to each other, concurrent to the 18, or give a long period of probation with a tail. As I indicated in my memo, it has been approximately 20 years since Mr. Casaus had a violent felony conviction. It has been approximately 10 years since his conviction before the case before Your Honor. That was in 2006. Mr. Casaus regrets that he didn't act quicker. Every single day, every single time I've gone to see him at NDC, which has been, I don't even know, 24, 30 times I've gone to talk to Mr. Casaus. Every single time, he cries. And he's not crying because the cameras are on him, because it's just me and him there. He's crying because he regrets that it's not acting quicker. They're following the trial, all the media attention that, oh, those tears are fake tears or crocodile tears, they're done to just get some sort of sympathy. Well, I disagree with that, because I've had some hours and hours with Mr. Casaus where he's quite genuine in his remorse. Nothing you do today, Your Honor, can bring Omari back, obviously. I believe there is hope for this man. I know there is hope for this man. As I indicated in my memo, he has goals for himself. Even if the court were to give him 18 years, he's going to come out 60 years old. He still has goals. He has things he wants to do. And I'm asking, and I don't believe that we should just throw someone like him away and that's going to solve all the problems. Give him an opportunity on probation for at least a period of this jurisdiction, Your Honor. That's what I'm asking for. In the courtroom today, Your Honor, I have Mr. Casaus' cousin. Her name is Yvette Romero. She'd like to make a statement to the court. And then, of course, Mr. Casaus has a statement.
Hi. I am Steve Casaus' cousin, but I always called him Stevie. Stevie was not only my cousin, he was like a brother to me. Stevie's mother, my aunt, took care of me when my mother could not. Me and my cousin were born a month apart. We spent a lot of time together as infants, as children, as teenagers. As infants, we hung out in the crib and playpen together. As children, we played chase, rode bikes, and teased each other. As teenagers, we played video games and kept secrets together. Stevie also had a younger sister, Tanya. She was the youngest, but by far the bravest. Tanya passed away of leukemia in 1993 at 19 years old, 1 year after giving birth to her daughter, Monique, Stevie's niece. That devastated my cousin. Family means the most to him. He was heartbroken that he could not protect his sister from death. Tanya left behind a beautiful baby girl, Monique. My aunt would raise her. She would be the only mother she would remember, and my cousin would be the only dad she would ever know. My cousin tried to be strong for his mother, but I could see and tell he was broken inside. My cousin started to make bad decisions with his life, and his battle with addiction began. His family meant everything to him. So when my cousin married Cynthia and decided to stay married to her, even though that was the worst decision he could have made, and everyone, including myself, was against it, his response was, "I love her no matter what she's done to me." My cousin loved her and her children with his whole heart. His intentions for her and him were to have their family. My cousin is not an evil monster the media has made him out to be. He's a man that loved a woman that took her son's life. I'm here today to ask for some leniency, not for my cousin, but for his niece, Monique, who calls him dad, and her daughter, Anasia, who only knows him as grandpa. My auntie passed away on July 22nd of this year, and hopefully after today she can finally rest. And my condolences go out to Amari's family. I loved Amari too.
Thank you. Your Honor, and then Mr. Casaus has a statement.
Yes.
Would you like him to stay at council table or come up?
Your Honor, this has been one of the horrificest things that I've ever had to endure in my life. People that know me, they know how much I love my family and my kids. I'm heartbroken every day dealing with this. I'll never heal from this. I miss my son and my family each and every day, my kids, Nivea and Stevie. It's horrible what happened. God knows the truth and I know the truth. And I know that in the end, on that judgment day when it comes, the final judgment day, I will be reunited with my son again. I wish I could bring him back and I would take his place for him or any of my family if I could. But I can't do that. Yes, I have made some mistakes in my life, but being a child abuser is not one. I gave my whole heart and my whole life to my children and to my wife and my family. That's all I wanted, was to give them all a good life. And I tried with my everything. My kids were not abused like everybody's making it out to be. I know I was there. And I raised them the best that I could. I will always love my baby, and I will miss him forever. And I know that there's nothing I can do to bring him back. But I just want him to rest in peace, and I want my babies to be, so they can try to heal and get through this time. I don't want this time to, so they can get through past this and try to live a better life. I don't want no bad for nobody. I just ask that God just bless us all, and like I said, He knows the truth and I know the truth. I love my kids with all my heart and soul, and I would give my life for them if I could. If I could bring Omari back, I would. But I can't. I'm sorry that this had to happen. I don't know why it did, but I just ask that you just, everybody, I forgive everybody. I know there's a lot of people. This was a devastating thing, and it was a tragic event for everybody. But I forgive everybody, and I just ask that everybody just look into their hearts and see the real truth of the matter, and know that I'm not a monster. I'm not an evil man. I'm a loving, kind, gentle, understanding man. Yes, I've made mistakes in my life, like I said, but I've owned up for my mistakes, and I will pay for my mistakes, whatever I've done wrong. I'm here to stand in front of you today, Your Honor, and just ask that you just consider that and look into your heart and see that I'm not this man and this monster that you're trying to make me out to be. I love my kids. I love my family. There's nothing more that I can say that would bring Mahito back. There's nothing at all that I could say. I'm thankful to David and Sylvia for taking my babies and raising them, and I know that they will do good with them and give them a good life. I've forgiven my wife, and I pray for her every day. I pray for us all every day, and I just ask that the Lord just forgive us and just see us through this. And I don't want no more children to be hurt. I don't want no more violence. I just ask for love, peace, happiness, and joy for everybody in the world. I'm going to try to give back as much as I can for children that are abused, you know, in the future. I'm going to try to be a mentor to children and to young adults. You know, that's going to be my goal, but I don't know. It's hard for me. It's very hard. I struggle every single day, every day in my life, because I wish that day could have been different. But I guess God had His plans already set in motion, so I don't understand it. But hopefully one day He'll reunite me with Him, and I'm just, I don't know, I'm at a loss for words, Your Honor, but thank you for hearing me out, and I just ask for forgiveness from everybody. You know, I know the truth, and the truth is that I'm innocent of this, but I'm here today manning up. You know, I could have, there's other options that could have happened, but I just asked you to consider that.
And Your Honor, just for clarification, when Mr. Casaus was saying he forgives everybody, he's speaking about his wife and her role in the death of Omari, and that's what he's speaking about. We've talked about that at some length. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any reply?
Just briefly, Your Honor. The court is granted wide discretion about what they can consider for the purposes of sentencing. The case law is actually clear that you're supposed to consider both the offense and the offender. You can see that in State versus Sinyard. And that is why, for example, that even the defense was offering up some of his personal character traits, some of his criminal history. And you see that even in the PSR when you look at the criminal history, the background, and the conduct and character of the person. And that is why I thought that the 911, that information from the 911, which was a snippet of the day in the life of this family, for those 20 minutes, was relevant, because it goes directly to the defendant's character, towards his conduct, and towards the kind of environment that these kids were being raised. That there wasn't any abuse also is contradicted by the statements from the Marquez family, where they were called to have to come and pick up Omari because he'd been thrown against a wall. It's also contradicted by the physical evidence in this case, the bruises and the burns all over his body. And while the defense is arguing that he did not kill him, and while the jury did not find that he laid a hand on him and hit him in a way that caused that internal bleeding, the defendant still killed Omari by not seeking aid, by not doing anything while Omari was there dying. He had a responsibility as the caretaker and father figure in that household, and he completely forsake any responsibility, any duty, and you see the reasons why are in those statements in the 911 call, is that he did not care for Amari. He didn't care whether or not he lived or died, and that was shown both in those statements and by his actions. And again, for those reasons, Your Honor, the state would ask for the maximum sentence.
Well, I've done this for a long time, seen and heard a lot of things. And I'm still a bit baffled, Mr. Casaus, that if it is as you say, I think it's a bit more than a mistake. That if, as a jury saw it, that if Amari is your son, is laying in incredible distress, and he surely must have been in incredible distress, that there wasn't some absolute immediate action on your part to make sure that that distress was lessened. And I'm finding it difficult to believe it was just a mistake. So I'm concerned about it. I think everybody in the room, I don't think that anybody disagrees with you that we wish this day had never occurred, and that Amari, as a child, would not have suffered as he did. And certainly his mom will be held accountable for her part in it. But we're not here about her part in it, we're here about your part. And so I think the sentence will be reflective of the court's perspective. Please stand at the count. As to count 2, child abuse recklessly caused or recklessly permitted resulting in Amari's death, I sentence you to 18 years state penitentiary. As to count 4, alternative to count 4, child abuse recklessly caused or recklessly permitted, I sentence you to 3 years in the Department of Corrections. As to count 5, tampering with evidence, I sentence you to 3 years in the Department of Corrections. As to count 6, bribery of a witness, and count 7, bribery of a witness, I sentence you to the Department of Corrections for 3 years for each of those. The counsel will run consecutive for a total of 30 years. I think it is clear that there's an enhancement for each one of those with the usable prior of 1 year for each one of those for a total of 35 years. I sentence you and remand you to the Department of Corrections for a total of 30 years to serve out your sentence, followed by a 2-year period of parole and a 5-year period of supervised probation and release once you're released from custody, with all the standard conditions of being supervised with regard to having no contact, any unsupervised contact with any children under the age of 18, obeying all state, federal, local laws, no possession or use of any illicit substances, that you pay the $100 DNA fee and the provide DNA sample if one isn't already in the system, that you pay the $5 domestic violence treatment fund fee, that if there is restitution that can be discerned and associated with the crimes of which you've been charged and sentenced today for the surviving children, brother and siblings, if it is by law allowable, then you will pay that restitution. But you stay here in Berlin County and that your probation will run concurrent with your period of 2 years of parole that will follow. You're to have no contact with surviving family members. That's part of your conditions as well. There is a crime victim reparation mandatory fee of $75 in this case.
Yes, sir.
that will also be required to be paid for the fact that it's in place once you're released. Count 2 will be characterized as a serious violent offense, that is child abuse resulting in Amari's death. I will not calculate and determine that count 4, the alternative to count 4, is a serious violent offense as an optional offense. Please be seated. Is there anything else from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding on my part. I don't know. May we approach, Your Honor?
Give me a second, yeah.
Else from the state or from the clerk?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
We'll be in recess. Thank you very much.
All rise. May be seated. Oops. Me too.